coach is forced to move his family to a downtrodden town after losing his last job as a football coach. He sees the potential of starting a cross-country team full of forgotten and troubled students with no aspirations or hope.
Welcome to the Walt Vault with
Michelle,
Andre,
Louise,
and me, Emily. We're a family-friendly podcast where we pick a new Disney movie each week. We watch it, share our thoughts, and then relate it to pop culture, fandoms, and anything else that pops into our heads. Enjoy!
hello and welcome to the Walt Vault, episode 47.
good morning.
We're recording
Good
very
morning.
early in the morning. I am sick. Let's do this. This week, we are talking about the 2015 sports film McFarland, USA.
Better known as McFarland Land.
Uno, dos, tres. McFarland!
McFarland Land.
it's a great movie. Loved it.
I throw in the extra land because it's like Disneyland. So it's like McFarland Land.
No, we throw in the extra land because that's how I say it.
It also kind of rolls off the tongue. McFarland Land.
McFarland Land. This movie was directed by Nicky Caro, who directed Whale Rider. Did you guys ever see Whale Rider?
No.
Did you see my face just drop?
Did you guys ever have to watch Whale Rider in a class
No.
like I did?
What class did you watch
What is
that in?
that?
I don't remember.
Like in high school?
Yeah, in high school. It's a film.
Glad I wasn't in that
it's
class.
a film about like Aboriginals in Australia, and
They ride whales?
they hang out in the ocean a lot with the whales.
Well,
and
that's
they're,
dope.
they're being subjugated against by the evil Australians, and other stuff.
Or
happens.
whale whisperers.
There's whales there.
There's
And
whales there.
Nicky Caro is also going to be directing the live-action Mulan movie.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after
Well,
watching this, I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
She did a great job.
Did good stuff. Starring Kevin Costner. Music by Antonio Pinto. First impressions.
I thought you were going to say Antonio Banderas.
Louise, let's start off with you. First impression.
Love this movie a lot.
He's smiling.
It reminds
guys.
me of home, and all the great parts of it.
Very nice. Andre.
I like this movie. You guys had watched it before I did, so you hyped it up like a lot. And it didn't quite reach your hype level of expectations, but it was still better than I
If
initially...
you had watched it with us.
It was still better than I initially thought it would be. This is my first time watching it. I had never heard of this movie before Louise started going off about it.
Let's remind
I
everyone
think-
that Andre is sick.
Yeah.
So that's his own fault for expectations.
I think the reason why Andre, and I'm just going to say it, this might be a bit sexist of me, but the reason
Against
why
me.
you didn't kind of have that high expectations as us is because,
Because we're all the same sex over here, me, Michelle, and
Yeah,
Louise.
No. I love this movie regardless. But, we got my wife over here with a lot of extra hormones carrying, baby room number 2. And
Oh,
Michelle
okay.
was,
I wish you could see
very
her face.
hormonally. So
You were
obviously
hormonally.
they loved it so much more because
Hormonally,
I
that's a
think
word.
It tied to their, it tugged at their emotional strings.
It did.
okay.
We're women. It tugged at it.
It did. I
No,
won't
no.
lie.
Gotcha. I thought you were...
Scientifically only, not stereotypically.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll
Or
give you.
biologically is what I'm trying to say.
I'm
I
fine.
thought
I'm
you were
fine if
saying
you had
that
said
they were
women.
all-
We like it.
thought you were saying they were
cool.
all trying to get some of Tommy Valle's...
Nah. What's the
their
uncle's
hormones.
Thomas.
What was the uncle's name?
I don't remember.
Low and slow, bro. Anyways,
Anywho.
let's go back to first impressions.
Slow and slow.
Michelle, what was your first
First
impression?
impression. I really enjoyed this movie. Like, I would watch it again. I would recommend it to anyone for... I'm comparing it to other sports movies. Like, I didn't see this movie because I was like, sports movie.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing it. My parents saw this in the theater and they absolutely loved it, and I should have trusted them and I should have gone and seen it. But I'm happy my first time watching it was with y'all because I loved it. It was great. Emily.
Yeah, I agree. Luis has been literally been trying to make me watch this since 2015 when it came out. We've owned it the whole time. He bought it when it came out. He was so freaking excited. We were like at Target, and he was like, "Yes, McFarland Land." And like we've talked about, every time we drive down the 99 and we see McFarland, he's like, "Let's watch that movie," and I'm like, "No." But now that we've watched it, I will say my favorite sports movie. Well,
yeah, it's really
$1 Million
nice.
Arm is really good too,
Oh,
but
okay.
this one is I like the cultural aspect a lot.
Right.
In this one,
And I think we should start with that. So we should maybe explain where we live in California is we live in a farming community.
Agricultural economy, for
yes,
sure.
Yes, we're from the Central Valley, which is huge on agriculture. We feed a lot of the world in this part of California.
They call us the breadbasket of the world.
Yes, like we're a very ag
and
community.
The almond basket, and the corn basket, and the cow basket.
We do our
Which I don't even
seasons
think we have
in
bread.
relations to food.
Do we have
Like
wheat?
I hate spring because it's almond season and they're gonna shake the almond trees and my face is gonna swell up. Like I like think of the seasons where we're from in relation to foods because that's just where we're from. So,
Well, and right now we just had harvest, and so everything is dusty. Like
yeah,
every
my
single
nose
thing.
is. You guys can probably hear it a little bit. Like I'm pretty congested. There's some stuff going on in the air right now. It's not my friend, but that's where we're from, and we're proud of it.
Yeah.
And also, the Central Valley is largely Hispanic populated. Where we are, there's a huge community. So this movie for all four of us, we can really relate to. Like when I saw McFarland, I was like, it's not much different than Ceres or Modesto or
the little
places
girls,
where we're from.
The little girl was like, "Are we in Mexico?" I was like, "Nah, y'all on Crow's Landing."
Stop.
Crow's Landing. Oh yeah, Crow's Landing Road, by the way, is like basically like quote unquote little Mexico. There's so many taco trucks. You can get 50-cent tacos where they cut the meat off the, what do they call that, Lou? Where they cut the meat off the
pastor.
Yum yum.
Cut the meat off the
Cut the meat
pastor.
off the
You can go to
pastor.
El Pollo Feliz and they like cook it on the
Yeah,
thing.
we
Delicious.
We live 170 miles north of McFarland, and everything from here to there is all farmland, basically.
Which
Basically.
it's really funny too, because I think, especially if you're not from California and you think of California, we have the weirdest perception to outsiders.
Yeah.
People think I've been to the East Coast so many times, and people have asked me like, "Oh my God, do you live in San Francisco on
Right.
the beach or in Hollywood?" I'm like,
California is
None.
so big, and people from not here think that
The
it's the
majority-
beach, Hollywood, San Francisco, and
in LA.
I mean, yeah, that's
But
it.
like the majority of California is ag lands.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're from. So
Well, and especially because we do live in I won't say the biggest valley, but one of the biggest valleys right in the center of the state. And so, like Andre said, even up farther than us, even if you go like up to Sacramento and then all the way down through Bakersfield, right before the Grapevine, where you kind of get down into Southern California, there's just that entire expanse out to the ocean and out to the mountains. Both are just
it's ag.
it's all agriculture land. So it's really interesting because every single one of the I won't say every single, but so many of the towns in between look exactly like McFarland. And it was so funny too, because we're watching this movie and they drive into McFarland for the first time off the 99, and like you said, she's like, "Are we in Mexico?" And I kept thinking to myself that this was present day. Like, it just because it looked real, it looked like today, but it was supposed to be set in the 80s.
87, yeah.
But at the same time,
Doesn't look any different.
it probably looked exactly like that in the 80s, and that's just how it's always looked. Because, like, Luis's hometown is Livingston, California, and literally McFarland is Livingston. Like, I mean, there's minor differences, but they're just very similar in the population, in the migrant community, in just the way that the roads look, in the way that the farms look. It's just so interesting.
Livingston is actually a little bit smaller, slightly smaller.
Oh my god!
Livingston has 13,000 people. McFarland land has 14,000 people.
Well, there you go.
That census is outdated. We're up to 14.
Oh, this is as of 2016.
It's funny
because Luis moved out. That's why.
So
Luis moved his happy butt out. Now
my
there's less
goodness.
people.
also, since we make the commute to SoCal Disneyland all the time, like you said, we always pass McFarland, and I wonder. I don't think I ever noticed the running things there before. Like on the overpasses over the freeway, they have the runners now. So I'm sure I'm assuming maybe they got some royalties from this movie to kind of like do up that.
Well, there's that too, but I think even before, I bet those runners.
You think they were there and we just didn't notice?
On that bridge. No, I think it was there probably since this dude took this team to state championship and that and.
Which is so nice. Is Livingston like that, where they all go out to the sports games and stuff?
Yes, unlike any town. So
to a certain degree.
Andre and I grew up in the same town. Michelle actually grew up there, but went to a different school. And sports were not like that in series.
No, not in series.
Like where the entire community comes out. We go to soccer games in Livingston, and Luisa's parents literally live across the street from the high school. So we'll just walk across, walk in, and people are just coming out in droves, like
piling
people who graduated 4 or 5 years ago in their entire family. And I'm like, that is not what happens in my town. No. So I thought that was really cool because it's the pride, I think.
Yeah.
You know, to see the new generation doing something really cool. But I was going to say about those runners, apparently when all of this hullabaloo was happening in the 80s and 90s, they ended up I don't want to say rebranding the mascot of the town into a silhouetted runner.
Oh, no more Cougars?
That was the high school mascot.
Right.
Excuse me, sorry.
But like the town became this silhouette, runner. So that's why when you're going under the 99 and you see the overpass, you have all these silhouette runners in the back.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And now when we drive by, I kind of want to see is Danny Diaz in the back, but
Danny Diaz is my favorite. You can't just say his name like Danny Diaz. That's Danny Diaz. He's
awesome.
the best.
Let's go
Michelle.
ahead and talk about the characters, guys. So
Okay, we can start with Danny. He's my spirit animal.
Okay, stop.
Start with Danny.
He's always snacking. Okay.
Hey. Danny comes in last for a reason.
Yeah, I'm okay with that reason.
No. So let's wait on Danny.
Yeah, let him be last.
Filled up to Danny.
Fine.
Let's talk about Blanco. Let's start off with Blanco. You might as well. I mean, the
All
story
right.
is somewhat
Jim
revolving around
Mr. Jim White.
So Jim White is played by Kevin Costner. The cost
was high.
And it's actually really funny because the first scene in this movie, literally first 3-4 minutes, Michelle, we're watching this movie, me and Luis, and then Michelle texts us, "Have you guys started yet?" And I was like, "Yeah, we just watched the first 4 minutes and they're already good." So she comes over, we watch it, and legitimately, he is in his town in Idaho. He's in his town in Idaho. He's the football coach, and he gets so mad at one of his players who was being a total
he's being a big old butt.
Yeah, like I would be very mad at this kid too, being a big old butthead, and he throws a cleat at not particularly at the kid.
Right. He
At the
wants to
wall,
hit
at
the
the
locker
locker.
behind him.
He throws it at the locker. It hits the locker, but then bounces off, and the cleat hits the kid's face, and he
scratches his face.
He bloody, right? And so the next
bloody.
scene is him moving to
Oh, the
California.
movie fan. This is all fun.
It doesn't say he gets fired, but
But it's like
he gone.
bye on
very gone. Not
Mayflower.
not even just
But you're
next town
so-
over in Idaho. It's like I gotta go 3 states over to California.
Which is so funny because, like I said, Andre didn't watch this movie with us, so he's watching it last night. I'm doing the dishes, and I was like, "He's fired." And Andre's like, "I know." I was like, "Yeah."
So Mr. Kevin Costner gets fired, and he takes his wife and his 2 cute little white blonde kids to
McFarland
to
land.
Mexico, to McFarland, and they roll up at their new house that is very different from the house that they were living in. You can see from the one scene. And they're like, okay, well, this is the life we're gonna make. And immediately, for me at least, I immediately loved the mom.
Yeah, she's great.
Miss Cheryl White, played by Maria Bello.
I feel like I didn't know her name.
I kept calling her mom or
wife.
But she's trying to make it work while everyone else is like, oh my God, this is just rough city.
Dad, why'd you bring us here, Dad?
Who's that woman on the wall,
You
Dad?
gotta paint the wall, Dad.
Virgin of Guadalupe, also Sacagawea. Bread basket.
Bread basket.
So through different dinner interactions, Coach White gets hired on at McFarland, and you start to meet all the different kids. And we can go through all the funny stuff because there's a lot of funny. But we start meeting all the kids. The first is Thomas Diaz, right?
Do we meet him first? I think
That's
we meet
not the
Johnny
first. We
first.
meet-
Oh, I don't remember who we meet in order, but
Okay.
You meet the one that got a concussion
Yes,
first.
Johnny.
Johnny's
on the
cute-
football team,
He
so he
is
doesn't have to
so
run the lap.
cute.
He's wearing a linebacker's number, and he gets clocked twice.
Hard.
at
Those
the
kids
football
were
games.
trying to get him.
Also, they lose 63-0. Man, they suck.
Wow.
Man, they suck.
not
You're
good at
right.
football.
So
They're only as good as their crappy coach.
oh god, the jerk.
Yeah.
jerk
Is it the
coach.
jerk? Oh my gosh. Okay. So you meet Johnny, and
he's
he's
the cutest. He's so cute.
You can see he's excited. He's like really the only one who just wants to do something.
yeah, he's like, yeah. Hi.
And he kind of, I wish they had called him like the ringleader or something, because he kind of like brings everyone together.
He even like the first day of practice, he's handshaking everyone. He's like, yeah, welcome to the cross country team. He's adorable. And then we meet the dude in the tank top.
Victor Puentes.
Yeah, Puentes.
Victor.
I just call him Puentes.
Oh, see, I called him wife beater the whole time, which I know.
Always wearing a wife beater.
I know that's
Listen,
so awful, but that's
reference to everybody on this podcast. Just don't put anybody in a wife beater. God, those shirts are awful.
And I asked Luis, I'm like, is they actually called wife beaters? He's like, I wonder if they were called white beaters and then they just got like a bad rap.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anywho.
Those dudes just kept wearing them as they beat their wives. Goodness
So
gracious.
awful, it's not funny.
No.
But anywho, he's like the Mac Daddy of the group. He thinks he's like the
He's
cutest.
the player.
He's like, you don't want to ruin all this.
Like,
When
Wanna get
White
this
tells him,
sweaty.
you want to get this sweaty?
ew. So like
And literally,
scrawny.
I remember for those listeners that don't know, I used to teach out of middle school, and there's a kid that was exactly like him. Would say stuff like that all the time. Would be like, "Hey, Miss Hurst, you still got a boyfriend?" Like things like that. Where
You're
I'm like, he was Puentes. Like that kid was just, he was feeling himself.
Can you not?
Hilarious.
So funny. And then who do we meet after that?
I
think they go into the
that's
DIAZ.
Where we go with Vaya.
So yeah, that's when.
No, guys, hold on. Let's backtrack a bit.
Okay.
I think we meet the Diaz brothers, Fuentes, and Johnny all.
They're
at
all
the
in the
same time.
PE class,
Yes.
remember?
Right.
Because doesn't the mom call the Diaz brothers away and they have to get on the truck?
So they,
Yeah.
they book it. and
Like,
that's
hey, we gotta
where,
go. It's
In the
like,
middle
tell your mom
school.
to wait. You tell her.
He's like, vamonos, vamonos.
That's
You
where
tell her.
That's where you have, Victor and saying, you want to mess with this. Victor actually ends up running, and the one that stays behind is Johnny.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I think next up we have.
Hold on, so we
Wait,
have
don't
David,
skip the Diaz's.
David, Damasio, and Danny.
All the D's.
The D's. And it's really funny because this is a little forward hinting. We could talk more about this later. But all of these kids were the actual kids on that 78 team.
Uh-huh.
Or, no, 87.
The 87.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. 87 team, except for Danny. He actually is a real person, Danny
Right.
Diaz. But he graduated the year before Jim got there.
Oh, okay.
But because they wanted to really reinforce that like familial tie,
Round out
they
the team.
They put all three
They put
in.
Danny in the same grade as them,
Gotcha.
which is cool.
But they're still all brothers. in
Oh
real
yeah,
life.
they're all three
They're all
brothers.
So were
yeah.
the two twins then? If they were they in the same grade, the two younger ones?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We could just say like
They were just
senior,
younger.
junior, sophomore, or something
Yeah.
like that. You know,
Okay.
just fudge it up a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
So,
Interesting.
but I thought that was interesting that all the other kids were actually on that one team, but
Right.
Danny was actually like
A little
a
later.
year older. Anywho,
But
go
they
ahead.
wanted to put that in the movie.
Yeah.
I get it. And then we meet Thomas.
Yes.
Thomas.
Tomas.
He just running home. He running to school. He running to work.
That dude is so fast.
What did they say? He clocked him at like.
Minute mile.
5 minute
Yeah,
mile.
5
He
minute
was
mile.
going 12 miles per hour.
And he's just running to work. Like
And I love how he
Yeah, I know he's
on
not
his
running
way.
like from the cops
Yeah,
or
he's
anything.
White is
running.
just following him. And he's like, what are you doing following me? He's like, you're really fast, dude. Also, I was telling Andre, I think all of the actors are very well placed. Like, it was a great group of quote-unquote kids. But I kept saying the whole time, like, Thomas looks not like a kid. And then we looked up his age, and he's in his 30s.
Yeah,
he was born in 86.
Carlos Prats
The
played
actor?
Tom.
And the actor who plays Thomas. I was like, why does he look so much older? And even if you look at his body type, he's like buffer,
Yeah.
which it makes sense that they would make him like the really quick one, you
Mm-hmm.
know? But I was like, he looks so much older. He's just short.
Do you want to know something good about that actor? Apparently, not every other one of them, but most of the other kids actually had like running backgrounds or sports. And he was the one who had to train the hardest to get into the role. So
Interesting.
it's funny because he's the one who was like the fastest,
Right.
the strongest, the everything. And apparently they had him like running like all day long, legitimately. He had to practice separately, and then he went and did CrossFit at night.
Man.
Like
No wonder he looks so buff
Yeah,
in this
he's
movie.
jacked
Because we were
up.
like, dude, that is a buff high schooler.
And like he impressed me in all of his like running scenes. Like there's the scene where they're going over the little hills of almond shells or whatever, right? And he's having a meltdown or whatever, and he's like, you know what? I'll do it again. Whatever. You can't pin me down, coach, or whatever he's saying. And then he gets frustrated, and then he continues to run away.
Yes.
Like he's still running.
He falls, and then he ran home at a 5-minute mile right after he ran hills for like 45 minutes.
And then he's still running home. Goodness gracious, Thomas.
He was born to run.
I
He's
love
a gazelle. No cheetahs catch him.
I just love it, dude.
Cougar.
Only
Oh,
whoa.
We
That
just
was
got
pretty good.
fancy.
That was great.
Man.
But
Then we meet our last kid, Jose Cardenas. And this is the kid, I call him the soda machine kid because
Yeah,
that's where we first meet him. Pretty
Still
much
changed from the soda machine.
he pretty much keeps getting in trouble. And so Coach White just gets him. Like he doesn't, at least based in the movie, they don't see him do anything other than getting in trouble. So
Right.
he's just like,
Yeah, because
you
I'll
get
tell
over
that
here.
one.
You're on the team.
I think what it was just Coach White needed someone else. He needed that one person. He was just walking around, snooping, sees a kid over there getting in trouble. He's like, I'm gonna go save him and force him to be on my team.
that's what he did with Tomas too. Tomas was beating someone up, and then he was like, So he goes into the office, and they're like, "Congratulations, you made the team.
Try
No
to look
suspension.
happier."
Try to look happier." He's like, "Great."
He's just like blackmailing his kids into like not getting suspended. I think
But you
it's
know what?
freaking hilarious.
I honestly think that that's so great. And this is like a little sidetrack, but I truly believe like White was an amazing coach.
Oh,
but
for
also, my father taught a volleyball team and the women's volleyball team, the women's basketball team, and cross country and track all throughout the time he was teaching at middle schools. And I remember like I would go to the school like as a kid, and all the kids would be like, "Oh, your dad's Mr. Hurst, Coach Hurst," and I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "He's the best coach ever." And like I would go to his volleyball games and his basketball games. There was one girl in particular that he basically like raised through sports or whatever, and I was like, "Oh, my dad was a great coach too." So watching this made me like proud of my dad.
Oh yeah,
I was like, "Good
because-
job, Daddy."
Well, and I think that this movie throughout the course, it just continues to show like the relationship between a good coach and their team and
Right.
how much influence they have on. And I think this is why I love Luis so much too, because Luis is coaching varsity this year. Well, he's the head coach for the soccer team at his high school, but it's so much more than just playing that game. Like the game is so temporary, it's fleeting. It goes
Right.
by so fast. The season's over. But the life lessons you teach the kids really make a difference. And so many of the kids, or I keep calling them kids, but the adults were interviewed later and said that like Coach White was the reason they went on and did all these other
Right.
things.
That feeling of camaraderie has to be great. Like I grew up as a gymnast, which is kind of a team sport, but it's not really. Like you're scored individually and stuff like that, so it's very competitive in that way, more so that all of the gymnasts were extremely petty towards each other. And then I remember going into high school and being on the volleyball team and was like, whoa, this is like a team, so that sports are good in that way, even though I don't particularly watch sports or anything.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that like for high schoolers and that, it's like really important
Oh, yeah.
And he
to learn that.
He kept pushing them throughout the entire movie too. Like there's
Yeah.
the scene where he's like plopping SAT books on their desks or whatever. It's like, hey, you guys can get into college if we go far enough, and then you'll be able to help your families out with a degree, which will be much better than you just working out in the fields. And like
I know,
that's
I love
that's
that.
a conversation that those kids will remember for like their entire lives.
Well, and they
That-
probably never had that conversation.
exactly. That's
Their
what I'm
parents
saying.
aren't telling them to go to college necessarily. Their parents are like, hey, sorry, but you like need to work in the fields for us so we can make some money.
Yeah.
But if they can get that running scholarship, like he just opened up, which some of them did, a lot of them, we find that out at the end, but that's just such a huge opportunity.
Yeah,
I
he
think
said
they
like,
all did.
You're right. They all
They all went to college. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it does I just love the evolution of the relationship in this movie. I think they did a really good job with that.
He's such like a father figure to them, which I just love. And it's, it's from a different perspective. It's probably a perspective they needed. And that's the thing about someone of privilege teaching in that kind of community setting that is willing to like understand them and
for
where they
sure.
come from. Then that's when they can really make a
Right.
huge difference.
There's the scene where the other teacher is like telling White to like, hey, you can like help out with these community things. These kids need you. This whole community needs you. And he's
the spicy girl.
Yeah. And he's like, I just got here. I coach football.
She's already telling him what to do. She's like, listen, you're from privilege. Let's help them out. You know what I mean?
And during that scene, I was like, yeah, he just got there. He doesn't care about anything about this town yet. I don't really understand. But then by the end, when he is an active part and she's reading the essays that the kids are writing and she's like crying and it's so beautiful, it's like, oh yeah, he really did need to step up. It was very good that he did all of that.
Yeah,
I love it.
Awesome.
So we forgot like the whole thing about this movie.
sorry, we're getting off topic.
No, it's not a bad thing.
The whole thing. Okay.
So the movie is about the running team, right?
Yeah,
So
but it doesn't
apparently-
feel like it.
Well,
Feels like a coming of age.
yeah.
I know it's about running, but there's a lot less running in this movie than I thought there would be.
I thought there was a
There was a
hell
lot
of a
of
lot of
running.
running. in this
There's a
movie.
lot of running, but
There is,
Or
but
just
I
ask
got
Thomas
distracted of it because
Apparently, the year that they decided to do this was the first time that they were going to like provide title funding for a team and a coach, and so that's how he ends up getting himself like this team,
Right.
Yeah.
Which apparently that's a little like funky with history, like with the actual team, but
especially since he got fired from coaching. You know.
well, in the movie, he got fired from football and then decided to take up running with no prior
No
knowledge.
background.
But anywho, so he takes these kids and he's definitely like in the family's eyes stealing them from work time, right? So these kids wake up at maybe 3-4 o'clock in the morning, go out and work in the fields, come back, go to school, go back to the fields, and then come home and maybe do their homework. Who freaking knows? Go to sleep, do it all over again. Every Saturday, every day of the
Just
week.
every day.
Very well could be doing it on Sundays, but who knows? They didn't portray that. Luis is shaking his head no.
No
No,
Sundays.
most likely not. They stop work on Sunday.
Okay, so
Most of the time.
it's the holy day. Okay, so but these kids are working so hard, and so there's a huge struggle in between. Number one, Coach White trying to get them to see that they can be a team and beat these other established white kids of privilege,
Yeah.
pretty much. Number two, get their time away from the fields without their parents getting mad. And number three, getting the funding needed, the clothes,
Right,
the everything
yeah.
that they need, the training equipment, the training
Dope
knowledge,
Adidas tracksuits.
the
The
Cougars,
best tracksuit.
the Cougars with the E,
I wanted Adidas tracksuit now so bad.
right? So
With that luchador looking cougar in the back.
Yeah.
Andre said that was the most 80s thing about this movie was the tracksuit
Yes.
with the hat.
dude, me and Luis looked at each other when we saw that tiger, and we were like, or the cougar, and we were
cougar.
like, oh my god, it looks like something Ed Hardy and
It's hilarious, though.
like
They're
They're so
Lucha Libre
proud
put
of
together.
it. I love it.
So it's really interesting because that whole character development's happening while they're trying to make state.
Right.
I love it.
Yep. So yeah, I was just pulling the story back together. Go ahead. You
Oh.
look like you want to explode. Tell
No,
them.
no, I'm fine. I'm just sipping my coffee. Just sipping my coffee.
Shipping my coffee.
You know,
hold on. I think this is a good place because I do know what the battle is because I may or may not have heard the pre-battle.
Dun 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 dun. The cross country battle.
Woo.
All right, ladies and
More
gents,
of a
this
mouthful
week
than I
we
thought it would be.
have
Running
a
battle.
little bit of a new type of battle. It is more of a coming of age battle.
Oh,
if you
okay.
will.
I thought you were gonna make me run.
Oh,
No, I was not.
oh, oh. Sounds like coming of age song.
So for this week's battle,
Hey, you're marrying me. Stop laughing.
yeah,
He's gonna laugh until the end of time,
he's
girl.
gonna laugh until the end of time.
He,
Anyway,
he
back
loves
to the
me.
subject.
It's fine.
All right, this week the coming of age battle is: who do you think needed the other more? Do you think Coach White needed these kids more, or these kids needed Coach White more? their
Yikes.
lives.
That's a complex
That
question.
is a
Ready,
very complex question. Because Jim White, before he had these kids, he was a mess. He had crazy anger problems. He got fired like 4, 5, 6 times.
That's
like
the
that.
best part is when you find out it wasn't just that one time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he
He's
got
getting
major
fired over and
issues.
over. The
Got
principal was
anger
like,
problems.
"Are you still gonna have these issues here?" And he was like, "No, I don't think so. I think I'm done with that." And then he was like, "Okay, good." And then he's in there the next week or whatever, saying, "Hey, Coach Franks over here is eating his apple, being a dum dum. He's
Let's-
saying you're having issues on the field."
Best
Which
scene.
it wasn't
Sorry,
even
that
an
was
issue.
so-
The coach is a jerk.
Oh yeah, that's what really, like, he didn't stand up for himself, which I understand at that point. Like, what was
Right.
he gonna say? But the cute kid, what's his name?
Johnny.
That's when he got the
He
concussion.
got concussion.
Like, he got laid out twice, and he takes him over to the side, and he's asking him, like, Johnny, what did he ask him? What day is it?
Yeah, what
Yeah,
day is
he's
it?
all-
He was like,
he's all
September.
Like, oh no. And he's like, I'm cool, coach. And you can tell he's not cool. And the head coach wants to put him back in. And so the quote unquote disagreement is that he wants to save him from further concussing.
Yeah, he's like, hey,
concussing.
Johnny, sit down. Like, he's going to sit down because he cannot perform right now.
Poor kid.
And then
And
Coach
then
Fangs
jerk
went in
coach
and
just eating his apple.
went in to complain. He whined. He snitched to the principal.
He's about to get stitched.
Mm-hmm.
So hilarious.
So-
when the principal's like, you had your chance to talk and you let me talk for you.
You're
jerk.
dismissed.
You
You know,
jerk.
you're not fired either.
And he's just like, oh, yeah.
Well, and you want to talk about that the freaking principal, Valente Rodriguez is the actor.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't take him seriously only because he played Ernie on the George Lopez show.
Oh, that's right. That's where I know him from.
And I used to watch the George Lopez show like religiously when I was still at home.
Yeah.
And so it was so funny because Ernie was like the stupid friend. And so in this, he was supposed to be like an authority figure. And I was like, nah Ernie,
you
whatever.
dummy. You dummy. He had a big old mug. He had
Yeah.
a gigantic orange mug.
Oh
And
my God.
I
Okay,
focused very hard
okay,
on it.
back
Anyway,
on
I said
track.
mug. I thought you were talking about his face, but you were talking about his
Oh,
actual mug.
God. All right, back on track.
Big old
So,
mug.
He had a Thanos mug.
Mr. White definitely needed this kid. His character development, he actually bloomed into a coach, but I think we figure out how much he needed this town and these kids at the end of the movie when he has to make the decision, is he going to go to Palo Alto where he's gotten an offer, or is he going to stay in McFarland? And his wife Cheryl does this whole speech which just like really hits home and like makes like he needs these kids. Like, they've changed him. What does she say about it feeling like home?
She says, like, this is the, what is that?
Like the first time it's felt like home or something.
Nowhere I've ever lived has felt this much like home, which is a very good line. Probably the best line in the movie.
Oh, for sure. She's my favorite character. That mom, man.
Yeah.
Woo. He be needing her too.
Right.
Like, he's losing his mind
She's
without
a
that
great
mom.
wife.
She
Yeah.
stayed positive the whole time, even when they were just getting there. She's like, all right, it's all right,
But
kid.
also-
leave your dad alone.
The kids freaking needed him. Tomas probably would have jumped off a ledge if it wasn't for Coach White.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard because I think it was equal. Like, he made a difference in a lot of kids' lives, but all of those kids made a huge difference in his life and his family's
For sure.
life in
Right.
general. You know, so I still think, as much as the kids like to think that they didn't necessarily need him, like Tomas was like, yeah, I don't need you, you know, but he was like his father figure.
He was a future shaper for them.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, maybe they didn't feel like they needed him in the moment, but he changed their future.
Sure.
When
And
he gives a speech at the end and they got I don't know who it was, but one of the boys had like a lone tear
I
going
think it
down
was
his face.
Damasio.
I was like, no, Damasio, no, he's crying. But I think in the end, like, he needed them more. Like, the way that I felt was like they changed his life like completely, but in the perspective of these kids would have had no future had he not come to said town in that way, then like the kids definitely needed him more. So it's like a tie for me. Like, they both needed each other, but it was like in different ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can say it was one more than the other. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down because like the kids had Jim White never shown up, the kids probably would have went on to continue working the field, started their own families, and kept the circle of life going in McFarland or whatever.
And they would have lived.
Yeah, they
You
would
know?
they would have been fine. Maybe some of them would have went to jail or whatever if Tommy kept fighting or what have you. If Jose kept stealing stuff from vending machines. So their lives would have continued on. And if Jim had never gone there, he probably would have kept going to different schools and probably flunked himself out. He's gotten fired permanently from teaching at some point if his anger issues kept up. So it does seem like pretty equal. Like this is the perfect fit for all of them. So who needed each other more? I think I will pick Jim because of those kids, he reshaped that entire town. You know, he reshaped the whole place is better because he was there
and his family.
Yeah, and
I
his
feel
entire
like
family, yeah.
I really would be interested, and this is one thing I wasn't able to find, but the relationship with his kids.
Yeah,
like how it was changed because of the familial ties of the town.
He goes from forgetting his daughter's birthday cake to throwing her an entire quinceañera
in one night.
Yes.
Like, you go, man.
The best.
So yeah, I kind of agree. I think that Jim needed the town.
Right.
Jim needed the change of pace in the life and
Yeah.
kids and get rid of his privilege a little bit.
Yeah.
No more burgers.
And I think
No
because
more burgers.
because they changed Jim, therefore he was able to change their lives for the better.
Sure.
Because he didn't really have that personality about him at first. So I can agree with you. I think Jim needed them more, and then the consequence was they changed him so much that he was like, I'm going to change their lives too, type of thing, because he got so attached to them. So I can agree. I think Jim needed him more.
Well, and that's one of my favorite lines in this movie is when they're all sitting around like after a practice, and he was like, well, just so you guys know, I used to train wimpy kids to be tough, and now I'm and then he doesn't really finish, but he was trying to say you guys are already tough.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's really cool because they're teaching him to have a softer side or a more accepting side.
Right.
Yes. And I absolutely love one of my I have two favorite scenes from Mr. White. Obviously his speech at the end, but I think where you really can tell he has changed is he goes to work at the field with the DIAZs to convince their father to let him be on the team.
Right.
And that's when he's really like, oh my God, these kids that I coach do this every day, and he's dying, that's intense for a coach or just a person in general to do that for somebody.
Yeah.
He really needed those kids.
Oh, yeah.
He was about them.
What do you think, Lou?
I agree with UMs and that he needed them more, and I agree with every point you made because had he just shown up, he probably would have done what he was set out to do, which is just coach, have a job, and not do much.
Right.
But these kids actually changed him, and from that, he was able to better their lives. I don't think he could have been the type of coach they needed to better their lives. But it's funny because you guys all, hit the nail on the head with the fact that because Jim needed them, as a result, you end up kind of figuring out and seeing along the way that they needed him, and essentially the community needed these kids and needed this coach.
And
it's
that
a complete transformation.
Well, and I think that's one of the coolest things about this whole movie. And I talk about trying to hold back the tears at the end. And you guys know how I hate feels. Don't want to feel them, right? But at the end, you see, and this is what I always want from the based on true story movies, is at least a picture or something of the real people.
Of them putting their hands in or something.
No, it wasn't even a picture. It was the video of present day team running with the actors running with them with Jim on his bike.
Jim on his Bronco bike.
That is fantastic because it showed every single thing that those they're adults, Emily, the things that these adults are up to, and every single one of them went back to the community and are teachers, correctional officers, writer for the LA Times.
Yeah.
If you think of it, out of how many kids are on this team, only one went to jail, and they could have all.
And he got out and went back to work in McFarland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or at least he went back. They're all in their hometown still.
Well, and the thing about the jail, we didn't really explain this, but the reason the jail is so important, not that just poor kids go to jail, but it was that in McFarland, and the way that they portrayed it in the movie isn't much different from real McFarland, but in the movie they portray the high school butting up literally against the prison.
Right.
And symbolically, that is the worst thing that I have ever seen.
You can't go to school and be thinking about your future all the time. Like you're constantly thinking about your future in high school, and you look out the window and see a prison.
And they're literally hearing like the prison bells, the prison like announcements and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, when they're running the race and you hear the bell like dinging, like, okay, come back in, inmates from the yard. I'm like, oh gosh.
Inmates from C Block. Like, oh my. You know, So there's a huge theme in this movie that many of the kids in McFarland end up in the prison system because of just the way that the town is built and the way that the stigma hits them. And in real McFarland, it's not that much different. It's like 2 streets away.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Right there.
And they very well could be running past it if they're doing that.
KVSP.
Yeah, the route we drive down, you see the jail first, and I'm assuming that the jail is closest to 99, and then I think on the other side of the jail you'd see the school, because I don't think it's very hard to see the school from 99.
No, you can't. It's like farther in. Yeah. It's farther west. But it's just really interesting because that is a town that has had a lot of crime associated just because of the poverty level.
Right.
And so it was so cool to see that only one of the team members had a run in, but it didn't define them.
Right, yeah.
I think that was fantastic.
I don't remember which one it was.
I
think it was Puentes.
Oh.
Yeah, I think
so.
Lou, are you voting for Jim?
Victor Puentes. Yep, Jim all the way.
But FYI, he was in the movie at the end running with them.
Exactly.
Like it wasn't like he was like bye.
Yeah.
No, he was still out there training with them, and I think that was fantastic.
And the fact that he was out there really kind of shows that no matter what went on in his life, he saw the value, and he believed in what this team did for the community, and he saw hey, I did what happened in my life is my life, but this community needs better.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's out there.
Okay, I think
Very
I think
good.
that ends like the most intense battle ever.
Good job, Lou.
Emotional battle.
Yeah, emotional.
Okay, I want us to get on. I almost have a battle question for Lou. It's not really a battle, but let's talk about how Mr. White threw his daughter Julie an elaborate quinceañera and then the altercation after, because then I have like a different discussion for us. So
can we have a discussion first before that, because it'll lead into that?
Yeah.
Well, and you tell me if this has to do with yours. I wanted to talk about like the town people.
Okay.
Like the town members, because they're the ones who end up throwing this quinceañera, because he knows nothing about what that even means.
He's all, what's a quinceañera?
My daughter just turned 15. She's like, when are you going to have her quinceañera? He's like, what?
A what?
But it's so funny because he's like, huh? He doesn't even know what it is, which is hilarious because where we're from, we know what a quinceañera is. Like it's a quinceañera, man. Yeah.
It's a quinceañera, man.
It's a quinceañera, man.
Oh my god. It's a coming of age for a 15-year-old, and a lot of times it's done in a church and it's a party, and there you go. I just explained it.
Yeah.
So,
a debutante ball, if you're unfamiliar.
A debutante.
A sweet 16.
There you go. It's
for
the equivalent.
15-year-olds.
Yes.
It's the equivalent of a sweet 16.
The best part of that scene is when he's like, okay, so he sends his daughter and his wife away to go get their hair done, and he's going to surprise them with this thing, and he sits down at the table. He's like, should we move this table? And they're like, listen.
In the backyard.
In the backyard. And he's just like, I don't know what he says, but he's basically like, we're just going to sit here and watch.
No, this is what he says. So it's the
shop owner.
Shop owner. So we'll talk about him too. The shop owner is like, Blanco, the one thing you need to know here is that we are not the Chiefs. We are the Indians. And then, all of these women come rushing in with like just
and
decorations and food.
And
and they're like telling him where to put stuff. And they're like, oh, you need to move this table because this is where the dance floor is going. And he's like, oh my God, okay, I will do whatever you say, girl.
Yeah. I will defer to y'all.
So let's talk about the townspeople, because then we can talk about the quinceañera and then we can talk about the altercation.
Yes.
So who's your favorite town person?
My favorite town person?
Yes. And it totally could be the DIAZ mom because she's hilarious.
I love the
DIAZ
mom.
is up there.
But I still, it's really hard.
I like the lady who owns the
chicken?
salon.
Oh.
And she has the chicken lady is good too. The lady who owns the salon, and she's like doing their hair and stuff, and then she's showing them her boyfriend's
honey.
car, and it's got her face on the front of it.
Is it
detailed.
Carla?
Yeah.
Carla.
Yeah, Carla.
So it's
Freaking
hilarious
hilarious.
because Carla is like painted on the front of her boyfriend's car in the style of the Virgin of Guadalupe.
So
got,
funny.
He
like, the
appreciates
halo.
me.
He appreciates me. Javi is the boyfriend.
Yes.
It's just so funny.
She's hilarious. I think my favorite townsperson is the shop owner. I really, really like him, but I just have to give an honorable mention to White's neighbor when she gives him the chicken.
So, Luis, can you explain like that? No, you can't explain that interaction.
Well, it's just
with the neighbor.
It's just familial. I mean, it's just being a good neighbor. You know, white people take casserole to a new neighbor. Mexican lady in the we don't even know her name.
No, she was the neighbor.
Well, the Mexican neighbor lady, she ends up giving him a chicken.
A live chicken.
A live chicken.
It's hilarious.
And, typically, that's the equivalent of Americans sending over a casserole.
Yeah, like welcome
okay.
to the town.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious because the next thing you see is
He's
him
in
going.
the shop buying chicken feed.
And that's when he meets the shop owner, who is my favorite. He's literally still trying. He's trying to sell him this miniature tree. He's like, in how many years?
5
I don't
years.
know. 5 years, you'll have some nice shade.
He's like 5 years. No,
there's no way I'll be here in 5 years, bro.
Which is so funny because we have to be real serious about like there's one corner store shop in McFarland. Like it's not like even like so we live in Turlock, which is a bigger, more established community. We have like multiple grocery stores,
Yeah.
multiple places you
We
can
got
go.
Walmarts. We got Targets. We got all this
Yeah,
stuff.
Safeway, Rayleigh's. Where you want to go? Save Mart. Ooh,
They don't even
right?
got a Kmart in McFarland.
Yeah, like we got a Costco, right? But they literally have a store. And so he is the store owner for this whole town, and he is so proud of himself because they've never closed in like, I don't know,
25 years.
25 years. So he's trying to sell him all of this stuff, and they end up becoming like BFFs because he's the one giving him all the ins and outs of
Of
The town.
McFarland,
town
and it's
and-
just so funny because when he goes to him, he's like, "Hey, I think I'm gonna need your help about throwing her the quinceañera."
I'm trying to find
which
out
is hilarious.
what his name is because I feel so bad in the movie. Is it Soto?
No, it starts with an S. Guys.
Okay. In the movie,
Yeah,
right as he's deciding between leaving to go to Palo Alto and staying in McFarland, he's talking to the wife and he's like, yeah, the shop owner, he really did me good or whatever. I was thinking of, and the wife was like, the shop owner has a name. And he's our friend. And I was like, that's right. What is his name
His name
exactly?
is-
I don't know his name,
know
but
his name.
Sammy Rosaldo.
Rosaldo.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Rosaldo.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There it is.
He's our friend.
He's our friend. That's right. He is
Oh,
our
we love
friend.
him.
I don't know.
So
his
then
name.
they throw a giant quinceañera for her, which is the best, and Tomas gets her like a little bracelet that his grandma made, which is so cute. The way he looks at her, and then he's gonna take her on parade, which I guess is a thing.
Quinceañera thing?
They parade.
I
them.
honestly don't know. You're barking up the wrong.
I don't know. Well,
said
they're
no to
gonna
every single
they're gonna
quinceañera.
parade her
I didn't know
around the
about the
town,
parades.
and Mr. White's like, "You got her," and he's like, "Yeah, I got her." And then a bad thing happens.
Yeah, so Javi, that was the
I like
boyfriend's
Javi
name.
too.
Yeah, Javi's a cool guy. He's in a car club. All the cars are really spoofed up. They got pictures of the girlfriends all on the hoods and stuff like that. The rims
Shining
are nice
them
and
all the
shiny.
time.
And he's like, yeah, I'm not a gangbanger, man. That's like something I did in the past or whatever. It's
I
not
like the
it's not
quote
me
he
now.
says. He's like, once upon a time.
Once upon a time, yeah, that's what he said.
He's
Now
like,
we're
"What do
just
you
a
think
car
the first
club."
thing they're gonna notice is my ride?"
Right,
Paint
yeah,
job.
yeah. I
job.
can't commit no crimes in this thing. So he
Truth,
So
though.
they're parading Julie around the town, and it's really nice. And then some stuff from the past comes up, I guess, and some old gangbangers come around, and I guess they just attack Javi. They don't really show
They don't
it in the
show
movie.
it, but
which is
you know,
actually kind of nice
It's
because
interesting.
I didn't
yeah.
need to see it.
yeah, but Javi gets shanked good.
He
Right.
gets stabbed.
Yeah.
There's nice, and I didn't really look like Tomas got hurt too much. I didn't really notice anything on him, but the daughter, we find out later that basically Tomas and like the team went in front and pushed her to the side so that she wouldn't be in the way, and that's how her knees got scraped up, her legs got scraped up pretty good, but it was
The boys
so then
protected
it's-
her.
Yeah,
they
protected
did,
her.
but we don't know that at the time. And as a parent going into it, he's freaking out. The mom's freaking out, and he's ready to get he's ready to get out of the town, because I can only imagine. And that was my question to you, Luis, is like, he has to make a really, really, really hard decision. And like, now you're a dad and you have a daughter. What would you do in that situation?
No, it's the same. You kind of start thinking about
That's
the
so
child's
hard.
safety. And at that point, I mean, it's difficult. First instinct is always to get him out of there. I mean, I don't blame
Even
him.
Cheryl, when she's talking to him, like in
Yeah.
the bed, is like, this better not just be about our safety. Like, to leave the town type
Yeah.
of thing. It's
Honestly,
it was
for
like
me-
really
for me, it just
complex
would've
for
been-
this movie.
It would have been safety. That's all. 'Cause
Right.
Yeah.
Everything else is wonderful.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing is that now, well, okay, in the 80s, especially maybe in Idaho, it was a relatively safe time. Do you know what I mean?
Probably.
My parents always tell me, like, it's like their revolving theme that when they were kids, they didn't have to lock their front
Right.
doors
Yeah.
and they could just play
My
outside.
grandma
Kids
never
play
locked her
outside.
door, and she
For hours. And
my grandma
hours.
never locked her door, and she lives right off 9th Street in Modesto.
Exactly.
Like, that was.
And that's a not so fabulous part, in case you guys wanted to know.
Oh, and yeah.
Not-
In
not
case
the
you guys
best
didn't
part of
know,
our
it's
town.
kind of the ghetto of Modesto.
It's the downtrodden. But yeah, and my parents, they grew up in the Bay Area, and I mean, now you are not leaving anything unlocked in the
Right.
Bay Area.
Yeah.
But they just talk about how times were different, and now growing up, like in this generation, I think we're just a little bit more savvy. I won't say that we're like more prepared, but we're just a little bit more savvy
Right.
because of crime rates and things. But I think at that time, I can imagine where for them, that might have been like completely out of
Right.
out of
Blew their minds. Never seen anything like
right. And the fact that there was like blood everywhere, they could see like the actual repercussions.
Yeah, and
of
he's
it.
like, the shop owner was spraying blood off of his
that. Off his
parking lot this
yeah.
morning.
I mean, it's scary to see
Yeah.
those types of things.
Yeah.
Right.
But
But it also happens, you know what I mean?
and it's not like it's the town's fault,
No, no,
you
no,
know.
no.
But I can see where that would be bothersome. But I want to talk about one other town interaction that was my personal favorite. It was kind of like the quinceañera, but so we talked about how Jim White, the coach, goes out and works in the fields with the Diaz brothers, and you can tell like worst day. He even says like that was literally the worst day of work I've ever done.
No matter what kind of crappy job I ever get, it'll never be as tough as this.
Yes, like that was the hardest thing ever. And so he goes home and you like see the look on his face when he lands in bed like I want to sleep for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so he wakes up and in the morning there is like all kinds of commotion and I'm thinking to myself like what in the world is happening in his kitchen? And he goes out there and his entire house is filled with all of these town ladies, his wife, the two girls, and they're all cooking. They're making tamales. And they're going to do a fundraiser for the team.
Yeah.
And it was literally the most beautiful thing because they were doing like a tamale drive, a car wash. And it just was so sweet because these moms cared so much. And I think he saw for the first time that they want what's best for their kids no matter what.
Right.
You know?
And I think, I mean,
let me add to that, they believe in him.
Yes, they do.
That was
especially
very-
because he
yeah.
went into the field
Oh,
for
yeah.
a day. Like that to
The
them
Diaz
was
mom
probably
was like, okay, I
whoa.
see you.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
you
Like
did
that
it.
was like okay. And in relation to that, I can only imagine how hard that work is. My grandma, both my grandma and grandpa have passed away, but my grandma worked at the Gallo Center for years and years on the lines with bottles, which is a very hard job. And my grandpa, he worked in like the cotton fields, like picking cotton. That was his job. And so my grandma had a huge garden in her backyard. And when I was a kid, like about 8 years old and on, she would pay me to go out in her yard and pull the weeds, pick the blackberries, do the plums on the trees, the peaches on the trees, dig up the potatoes, dig up the carrots. And I hated it.
Right.
Like, oh, I hated it. You've never gotten stung by a blackberry bush that many times. Like, they're so thorny. Just everything about it. And I mean, I appreciate that she would make me do that kind of stuff for money. Or just even shelling pecans forever. Like, we would have all these pecans, and we would go into her house and have buckets and buckets of pecans, and then we would shell them. Just things like that. So, I mean, I can't even imagine doing one day out in the field like that when I could only get some hours in and my back was killing me and I was dead. So that's crazy.
Yeah. The amount of work ethic that all the kids in this movie has is astronomical. Like, this movie really made me realize how
They're
incredibly-
superhuman.
how incredibly lazy I am as an adult male, and like they're just getting up super early in the morning, going to work, going to school, going to practice, going to work again, going to sleep. And then doing it all over again.
And I
the
get
very
that they're
next day.
young. Like I used to do, like in high school, I was getting up early, going to zero period, doing choir, doing the sports teams. But I still wasn't doing as much as them, and I was dead tired all of high school. I can only imagine.
Right, and they seem to be perfectly fine. They're just happy-go-lucky the entire time that they're doing all of it.
I will add a bit of an asterisk mark to that statement when you said all of them. I'm not quite sure about Mr. Puentes, what he was doing.
That's
he
true.
doesn't want to mess all that up, you know? And
Can't get this sweaty.
If Cardenas, I would have liked to get a little bit more of a backstory on him, because it would seem that he'd be kind of in the same boat. And I would only say that Victor wasn't, just because, you know, Victor was Victor.
Yeah.
You know,
Hobby was Victor's uncle.
His
That's right. Okay.
sister's brother.
Gotcha.
So let's talk about that for a second, because this is a conversation Luis and I had. We talked about this for like 30 minutes on a car ride the other day after watching this movie. It was really interesting to see the economic differences even between the kids in the town.
Right.
Because if you look at the Diaz family and you just look at like what their dinner table looked like, they had all kinds of people, obviously, because there's a large family.
They owned a home.
They owned a
They
home.
owned a home.
They had
but-
land.
And everybody lived in the home.
Yes.
Grandma,
No, they didn't
aunts,
have
uncles.
land.
No, Dad was the foreman.
Yeah.
Oh,
Or
yes,
someone
I'm
who
sorry.
owned land.
But they, obviously we know our Danny, but they ate well. There was no worry, or at least not an immediate worry for like basic resources.
Right.
But you look at like Thomas's family and like Luis was saying, Jose, maybe that was not the same thing, because so a lot of the problems we kind of find out with Tommy or Thomas, is that his dad is more migrant in
Right.
his
He has
working.
to travel for work.
So instead of like the other dad, the Diaz dad, who gets to sit there, he has his land, you work the land, and then you go home.
Right.
His dad has to go off and do things, and that makes it a lot more uneasy. The pay is much less normal, and
So that's why when his daughter gets pregnant, he goes off.
he loses
Yeah,
his
he's been
mind.
Loses his
also
mind.
because he was gone. Like, can you imagine coming back and phones and things are different in the 80s. I even have to think about that. But like, you come back and your daughter's pregnant, and you're like,
Real pregnant.
I've missed all this time. We don't have any money. How am I going to pay for this?
Right.
Like, I'm not justifying the fact that he's getting so mad and punching the walls and things like that. But I can also see like that's such a complex, hard home life that's crazy.
He
Poor
must
Thomas.
have been gone for well over a year, because obviously,
Yeah.
Right.
he shows up, his daughter's about to give birth.
And the wife's
Yeah.
like, "You're always leaving me," and he's like, "I know, but I got to make money," and that's so hard.
Well, and I think it's interesting to even see the differences in their home lives, because the reason I even bring any of this up is because Andre, his last comment was that if he realizes how lazy he is. But really, think about your high school experience. It's not even about laziness, it's about the privilege.
Right,
because
yeah.
if you have the privilege to be able to not have to work like that, then you have the ability to be quote unquote lazy, right?
yes,
Yeah.
Because you don't
exactly.
have to do
Yeah.
all those other things.
I got really good at video games, and these dudes.
You didn't work in high school?
Yeah, I did work, but I
Not
worked
like a lot.
I worked at a country club. I was a server, and I
worked at a country.
You worked at SOS.
Yes, I worked at the SOS club, and I worked like
That's a cute privileged
I
job,
worked
isn't it?
probably like 20 hours a month. Like, it wasn't a
Okay.
lot.
Oh, see, I was
Yeah.
working the maximum amount of hours I was allowed to work as a minor. The day I turned 15, my dad said, "Not that I'm getting a job, that I'm getting a food service job." And that was his thing, is that, I mean, he was like, "You're getting a food service job because you're going to learn a lot." I really appreciate things my dad did for me. So the day I turned 15, I went to the KFC on the one, oh gosh.
It's
like,
in Modesto. They
yeah,
don't
it's
need to
in
know.
it's in Modesto.
Nobody knows our street.
It was
Nobody
not a
cares.
nice KFC. We got robbed at gunpoint. That's the point. It was not a nice. It was not a nice KFC. But I worked there basically every single day And that was rough because I was doing that. I was doing choir. I was doing lots and lots and lots of things. So I was tired in high school. But do I appreciate it? Yeah. Thanks, Dad, for making me get a food service job. It was great.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I did not work in high school. I didn't. And I didn't have to. And it's funny now, though, because, and Luis and I have talked about this, when I look back, and I think he has a kind of similar story, even though our home lives were very different. I realize now that my parents were sacrificing so much, like as an adult looking back, so that I didn't have to work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can't imagine what it would have been like had they not been able to, and I would have had to have
had to work. Yeah.
But I mean, I look back and I really do thank my parents because they gave me a lot of opportunities that these parents in this movie just didn't have the opportunity to give their kids.
Oh, and my parents gave me tons of opportunities but they made me also, it was my dad more than anything. He made me work and like do these things, which I appreciate because I learned a lot of lessons in that. Like if I really needed to work 2 jobs, I could because I was like doing so much. You know what I mean? But I mean, it was great. It was good. Working at Ghetto KFC. Have some chicken every day for dinner. I ate free every night, so that was nice.
Yeah.
All right.
See my chicken.
Pretty
Free
good.
chicken.
Got your chicken.
Yeah.
Anywho, so how we feeling about this movie? We liked it, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, do we have any Easter eggies?
I have some issues
Luis
with the
does.
movie, but
I
go
got
ahead.
one Easter egg. Okay, the only one I could see. I think this is a scene right before the procession. Where they take the Julie in the car.
Yes.
Caravan, whatever. Blanco asks Javi, "Are you gonna go slow?" And he's like, "It's the only way we know how to go, low and slow." And that's actually an Easter egg from Cars.
Yes.
Ramon.
Whether or not it was done on purpose, who knows?
Pretty
But
sure
Ramon
Javi
says
is
it.
Ramon. You know?
Low and slow.
Low and slow,
Hilarious.
baby.
I will tell you, I have 0 Easter eggs. They're more like fun facts, but I would like to hear Andre's issues before we go into fun facts.
Yeah. Okay. So my issues are with the movie as a movie, not with the story or any of the acting or anything like that. It's just that like I don't like how this movie is paced. I think what happened is that this is a big story to tell. And they put as much of it in as humanly possible. And I bet they filmed a lot more than what is actually shown in this movie.
Probably.
And so what I think happened is that they did not necessarily like shortcuts, but they did like a lot of editing to make it move through the story quicker than I wanted it to move. You know, like I didn't feel like I got enough time with Jim at his previous job, or them moving into the town, or them introducing the characters, the kids at first, you know, and that continues throughout the entire movie, and it comes together as a complete story, and I get the entire thing, but throughout watching it, I wasn't enjoying it as much as I think I could have. Like you said, this was your favorite sports movie. I think like Remember the Titans is that for me. And I think that movie is better paced than this one.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because during that whole conversation, I told you we had a 30-minute conversation about this movie. I said I like this movie better than Remember the Titans, specifically for this reason. Now, this has no reason about what you're talking about, other than I appreciate. This is going to sound so stupid.
Corny.
Really. What?
It's going to sound corny.
No, it's going to sound like I'm a privileged white person.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I have such a hard time watching injustice and straight out racism.
Yeah.
It's so hard for me to
watch.
watch.
There's a couple coaches in here I want to jump off a bridge.
Right? But in Remember the Titans, it's worse.
Yeah.
And it's much more blatant.
Sure.
So for me, watching Remember the Titans makes me feel so uncomfortable. Not even just like as a white person, like I feel bad, but just like it just makes me feel so like crappy.
Right.
That it's hard for me to watch. This was more, even though there was some straight up like racist things happening here.
I heard they can only run fast if a cop is behind them.
Oh my God. Or
and
something
there's a Taco
about,
Bell
like,
in front of
or
them.
something. I was like, stop. First off.
Goodness gracious.
You have no idea about their tacos.
Trip that kid.
They don't eat at literally when they said that, I was like, they don't eat at Taco Bell.
They ain't never been to no
Never
Taco
eaten
Bell.
at Taco
They're
Bell.
going to the taqueria, baby.
But for me, it's easier to watch because it was more laid out as fact.
Sure.
as it was like an instance of racism.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
And I understand that that's a personal problem for me. Like, it's hard for me to watch that. But I think it was because it was like glossed over.
Yeah.
So it made it like more
Yeah.
it made it more easy for me.
A little bit lighter in that tone.
I know
need
that. I guess the reason I say that it's like awkward for me to say that is because I'm saying that I would rather not watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it made it more enjoyable for me because I wasn't uncomfortable.
Yeah,
that
I
makes
need to
sense.
watch Remember the Titans again because I
But it is a
can't-
really good
I
movie.
can't
Yeah.
like pull stuff. Like I watched it as a kid a lot, but I can't like pull it from my brain. Like I don't necessarily remember everything. I think the reason I liked this movie so much is just because of the community we grow up in,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
could relate
It's
to
very,
it.
very similar.
Very,
to
very much. Like
Right.
and also I work with kids too, so it pulls at my heartstrings. But I will admit that I wish we would have gotten more backstory on all of the kids of the team.
Truth.
Because some of them just kind of get lost in the background.
Yeah.
Like I knew everything about Thomas, but I kind of got lost with some
Right,
of
you
the other
didn't
ones.
Get
you know?
Jose's backstory or
I don't even remember who Jose is, honestly.
The
Like,
soda
I-
kid.
Soda kid.
Okay, but
Exactly.
like we don't get as much. I even wanted more about Danny. Like I wanted more about Danny.
Yeah, so-
He doesn't talk much, but I like him.
Right. Yeah.
Truth.
So,
No, I agree with
that's
that.
my main issue with the movie is that the pacing doesn't
Okay.
do it for me necessarily. Like I think it could have been more evenly paced, or even if it was already fairly long.
It was
like
a long movie.
It didn't feel
Like over
crazy
2
long,
hours.
but
It was
there's
over 2
definitely some
hours.
length in there. Yeah, it's 2 hours and 9 minutes. So like I'm not sure if I wanted it to be cut down more so that it was more succinct, or if I wanted it to be longer so that we got more of the story in there. But I think its
Yeah.
current running time was
All right.
not ideal for me.
I never felt like it was too long. I thought it was a good length, and I enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie. It felt quick when we watched it the second time because I was cleaning the kitchen. I was like, dang, it took me that long to clean the kitchen. We're already almost at the end of the movie. That's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked it. Emily, do you have some stuff for us?
Yeah, just some fun facts about
How it's like related
real and
yeah.
everything. So this is really interesting. I personally think that Kevin Costner was 60-ish when he did this movie, and apparently he read about the McFarland High School races and Jim White and as a coach and stuff years ago in Sports Illustrated. So when he was approached for this role, he was like, "Heck yes!"
Wow.
Kevin Costner is This was the
good.
role for him. I told Andre, I was like, he looks like a coach. He looks
Yeah.
like a PE teacher in a high school.
Yeah.
Like, he fit the role very, very well.
I agree. This one's really interesting. So the extreme hill that the boys have to run up during the cross country competition, the really like
the last one.
The one
yeah.
that Danny keeps looking at.
Yes.
The qualifier.
Yes.
Mountain.
It apparently, so everything was shot on location. There was no green screens. There was no special effects.
Yeah.
They all had to run up that. And even, this is the best part. During recording of the scene, the porta potties were placed at the bottom of the hill. And so the director, all of the crew, all of the kids, even Senor, they all had to run up and down the hill every time they wanted to go to the
Oh my
bathroom.
I
or
would have been
between
peeing behind a
scenes.
bush.
Right?
Thank you.
So multiple times a day, they were making themselves go up and down this hill.
That's hilarious.
Which I think is fantastic.
Wow.
God, I was even thinking about their last race, which was like in the Hollywood Hills, because you could see the Griffith Observatory and stuff. And I've hiked those hills, and it's torture. They were running them. Like, come on, beast mode.
Good.
Right? I thought that was really cool. Another really cool thing is that they used a lot of locals in this movie. So a lot of the extras, so the neighbor lady very well could have been like just a resident.
Right.
Because they said that for the filming, Nikki Caro used locals as extras, and Sergio Avalar, who is Victor Puentes, is actually like a McFarland resident.
Oh, wow.
So that's really cool that they used, the locals so that it feels true and it feels real to the area. This one I really like because I talked so much about how much I love Mrs. White in this movie,
Yeah.
Cheryl. So apparently she was all that and more in real life. She was like known as the team mom, and she was taking care of them all the time. She was like constantly making them sandwiches. She accompanied them on all their trips, and she was making sure they had beds, blankets, food, and that they took showers so they wouldn't stink, which is hilarious because don't you have to remind teenage boys about that?
Yeah.
Haha. Making them sandwiches. What is a sandwich to these boys?
A sandwich?
No. In case you guys don't know, at least in my household growing up, sandwiches are non-existent in my Mexican side of family. Cause
you guys want to
to
have
us, sandwiches
PB&Js?
is a American thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's why I think.
Is that why you always make me make you sandwiches?
I like sandwiches and burgers.
So this is really interesting. Apparently, in real life, Jim White did go and work in the fields with them.
Oh, okay, good. I wanted to look that up, but I didn't have a chance.
That was a real thing that he did. And Kevin Costner actually went out and worked a day in the field too and was like, I hate my life. Like, don't ever make me do that again.
He looked very tired.
Yes. So I don't think that was, maybe that was the day. I don't know.
I mean, maybe.
But long story short,
twice?
yes, he did it twice. And so when he was saying like, that was the worst thing I've ever done, he was not lying.
Right.
He said that was very, very hard
work. Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. A couple other things. This one's funny. I like that the hero car. So the car with Carla on the front.
Okay, yeah.
Apparently that is not just for the movie. Apparently that is Nikki Caro's car.
Oh, that's the director's car?
That's what this is saying.
Interesting.
1970
So is that supposed to be her on the
No.
hood? Oh, okay.
1970s Chevrolet Caprice.
They probably just painted it for the movie.
The beautiful classic car. Oh, yeah. So that's her car.
Okay.
And then they added the features. Like everything else is there, but they added, the
That's
girlfriend.
hilarious.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Which I think is freaking funny. So that's actually her real car. So they were like, you better not mess it up.
Right.
So this one's a good one. Ramiro Rodriguez is Danny Diaz, right? He's the kid who plays that.
Mm-hmm.
He had no intention of auditioning when he agreed to drive his cousin to the casting trials for McFarland, and he landed the role of Danny Diaz after being pestered repeatedly by the executive producer.
So the producer just saw this kid. He's
I
like,
love him even more.
that kid's got to be in my movie. Look at his mustache. Look at his hair. He's perfect.
You're my Danny Diaz. I don't even think why we talked about why we like Danny so much. Danny,
The best.
number one, the best part about this movie is that he has, number one, no reason to be on this cross country team.
No, not
he
really.
is overweight,
He's a little chubby.
doesn't want to run, doesn't want to do any of this stuff.
Likes eating. Doesn't love running.
He's the first one to say he wanted to be on the team. Is that true, Lou?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. He was the first one, and they were like, anyone else?
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
yes.
man, I
Johnny,
forgot about
Johnny
that.
was going around asking everybody. He's asking Victor, and Victor's like, nah, I don't really care. And Danny's like, can I be on the team?
Yes, you're right. I'm so lying. Okay.
I love
he does
Danny.
love to eat, though.
Yes.
And
The-
it's
I
so
love it.
funny, though, because he's every time you see them running, every single time, everyone's pretty much in a pack. They might be spread out, but they're in a pack. And then Danny is like
He's
At the
coming
end.
up, bringing
Danny,
up the rear.
coming
Run
up around the
faster.
corner.
The
if
anchor.
you ran faster, I'd pick on someone else, Danny.
But it's so beautiful because Coach White calls him the anchor of the team, and it's so true. Because
Yeah.
had he quit, then everyone else would have been like, well.
He wins the state champs for them. MVP, Danny all the way.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's
get
cool
it,
because
Danny.
even in the beginning when he's just joining the team, he's like, Danny, you are going to be in last place for the most part, but you're important to this team, and we need you here. And I really like that he
Nobody trained harder than Danny.
I really like that he said that to him just starting out. Like he was never gonna put on airs that he was
Danny knew.
that
he
he was
knew.
gonna be running up there with Thomas.
And you know
or
what?
whatever.
Danny didn't care because Danny was carbo loading before races, throwing up when he's seeing hills.
On rice and
asking
beans.
Mr.
Rice and
White, he's
beans.
like, "Come on, how high is the hill?" And he's like, "You'll see it when we get there." And he's like, "But how high?"
And
Because
then he
Danny
sees
is
it.
me.
Easy.
For those of you that didn't know, I had a very brief time with cross country. It was not fun. I needed one more unit to graduate high school, so I had to do the cross country team. I ran 2 races. I was last place in all of them. Sprained my ankle a couple times. I hated it. It's great.
So wait, you can shed some light on this for me because they showed cross country, but they didn't explain a ton of it. How far are they going for the most part? 3
yeah,
to
but
5
you
miles?
train more than that. So, like, for example, from the college, we would run the canals, like all through the canals around where my high school was, and then we would run to this corner store, and that corner store had a walk-in freezer. It was like an AM PM, and they would let us walk into their freezer because it was so hot, and we would like chill in there for like 5 minutes, and then we would run back.
Okay.
And
Oh.
I hated it.
But
and we
3 to
had
5 miles are the
a
races.
very, very hard meet. Our qualifying, like The hardest meet was in Frogtown. What's the Frogtown called?
Oh.
No. Well, I think it might be Angels Camp.
Angels Camp.
But it was
The
a hill.
Frogtown.
It was a hilly race.
Mhm.
Like there was multiple hills. It was dusty. It was like in the wilderness. And I ran that race and it sucked. And that's when I sprained my ankle. And there was a dude on the cross country team, and he went and like got me and like helped me finish. It was cute. I hated it.
I hated it.
I hated it. I missed practice. I would never go to practice. I'm like, I'm not going.
Okay.
I literally hated it.
Well, I'm glad
They're working way harder than me.
Michelle is not Danny Diaz because
No.
Danny Diaz was at every practice.
Danny never stopped.
No, Danny was way better.
He
than
never
me.
stopped.
I was a lazy butt. I hate running, man.
Danny was really great in this movie. Like seeing him overcome these hurdles that everyone is throwing in his face the entire time is
so
really motivational
positive.
and inspirational. And at the end, when he is the one to come up ahead, I was cheering. I was going
We were
so
like,
hard.
Danny. Danny.
My favorite part of the whole thing is the reason he ends up ahead of other people is because wasn't it Jose?
He went out too
hard.
fast.
He just
He didn't
out
pace.
the gate was like, screw this, I'm going.
It's the state.
Yeah, he was
my
nervous.
dad always said that to me during the race. He's like, you pace yourself. And I was Jose. I would always go out like running like, yeah. And then I would slow
no,
down.
you gas out.
Right.
Yeah.
So at some point, he's like falling behind everyone else. And Danny comes up like slow and steady, wins the race kind of kid. He's like coming up, passing all these people
And then
who
he
gassed
starts
out.
booking it. Yeah.
And right at the end, he books it, passes the finish line, and literally falls over. And I'm yelling at the TV, don't even matter, Danny, you
And
passed.
I love it. The coach is like, is that Danny Diaz? Is it Danny? And I was like, he's the best coach ever.
I like it
love
because
it.
a couple of shots later, like Danny is still on the ground and Jim just like pulls him over.
He's like, you did it. And they lift him up at the end. And he's like, yeah, he was the MVP in my eyes. It was great.
God, it's so good.
It's funny because I should have talked about this at the beginning, but my dad's side of the family is all hardcore runners.
Mm-hmm.
Hardcore. Like two of my uncles are going to China or another country to run like a really long race. I had my uncle Ken ran that 100-mile race in the desert. Like they do like hardcore running.
miles.
I wouldn't
They're
even do
all
1 mile in the
runners.
desert.
They all ran in high school. They have like state winning times in Oregon. And then so when I said I was joining the cross country team, they were like, yeah, you got those Hearst genes. You're going to be so quick. And I disappointed all of them.
Well, look at you now.
Yeah. Look at you go. Not
Okay.
running.
I did run a half marathon, though.
Yes, you did. This is my last fun fact, but I think it's a good last one. So, Coach Jim White, as we know, is retired now. But if you go to McFarland, if you drive by like we do, chances are you'll see him out there on his bike because he's keeping up with the kids every evening with a lot of the original team running alongside.
Yeah.
So, at the last scene we saw was
One of those.
was the real guys running with the actors, but apparently those guys run out there with the team, and so does the original Jim
Which is
White.
so- they have to be there. That's awesome. They're still running at that, like, years later. That's great.
That's awesome.
He retired in 2002, and after teaching in McFarland schools for 40 years and coaching for 25.
Right, yeah, that's the other thing is that he in real life, Jim White didn't get fired that many times.
No.
And also he had been working in McFarland before he did the cross country team, and there had been a cross country team there at that school, but it had shut down for whatever reason, and he's
He,
the
like,
one who
brought
brought
it
it
back
back.
up.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then got them a bunch of state championships.
All right, what's this got on the tomato meter and money?
On Rotten Tomatoes? This movie has an 80%, which is pretty good. It was received well at the time, but yeah, I had never even heard of this movie before we decided to watch it.
I'd heard of it, but
Before
I just hadn't
Luis
watched
was
it.
Before
McFarland
Luis
Landing?
was bringing it up all the time, but yeah, it was well received. People liked it. Let me see, on IMDb it has a.
I think it's a little bit lower on IMDb.
Yeah, I think it has a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb. In terms of shmoneys, it had a budget of $17 million, which is really low for a 2015 movie, honestly. Like, they did this movie, they found a town that said, hey, boys, run around, we're going to film you.
And I think that's
that was
why.
it,
Is
you know?
because there was a lot of shooting on location,
Uh-huh.
real like there's no special effects.
Yeah.
They just did it.
It's not expensive to film in McFarland, USA. You know.
No. I'm sure someone's given up their house for them to sleep in.
Right,
Like it's not. They're having those tamale sales and they're just eating. Like
Wasn't
it's fine.
an expensive production. So in the U.S., it ended up grossing $44 million, and then I think. Did it have a worldwide release? No, its box office entirely was $45.7 million. So it did well. It made its money back. It was a success as a movie.
Good.
Are we doing ratings?
Yeah, what are you going to give it, Andre?
I think I'm going to give this movie a 7.5. It's very enjoyable, very fun, funny, emotional. Those emotional moments, they hit really hard. Like when he's throwing her the quinceañera, when they get attacked, when they're deciding to move to Palo Alto, when they're winning the state championships. It's all very good. My problems with the movie are the pacing, and also the music bothered me a little bit at some points. Not the actual music itself, but where it was presented. Like there was a couple times where they won, or they didn't win a match. They came in fourth and got to go to state, and the music kind of like it wasn't as triumphant as I wanted it to be.
Oh.
Like I wanted to celebrate that they won, and the music was like ding 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 ding. You're
like, excuse me.
I don't
this
think
is-
I really
what's
noticed that
happening?
as much.
Yeah, I noticed it, so that's a detriment to
Well,
me.
here's
But-
the problem for me. I didn't notice the music at all. So
Oh.
I guess that's an issue.
Okay,
like if
yeah.
I didn't even notice
Yeah.
that
any
it was
musical
there.
choices.
Yeah, and sometimes it was like really quiet. Like there were scenes where there is no score at
Right,
all.
right.
Where they're just running out in the streets of McFarland or whatever. Yeah.
They're like, this is real.
Yeah. I looked
Hear the trees.
I looked it up, and the composer Anthony Pinto, he done like 4 or 5 other movies as well as this one that year.
All right.
So he's a busy guy. You know what? We're not gonna score this scene. I ain't got time for it. So yeah,
It's a 2-hour-long movie. We ain't got time for this.
so yeah, 7.5 for me. Very good, enjoyable.
All right, I'm going to give this movie a 9. The storyline was killing it for me. I can relate to it. It was inspirational. It hits home based on where we live. For all of those reasons, I enjoyed it so much. And I don't really like sports movies. And this is like a serious sports movie that I can actually say, like, I will definitely watch this movie again. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Emily.
I'll give it an 8.5. I really enjoyed it. I will watch it again. My major problem with this movie, and this is going to sound bad, but the accents bothered me.
I don't think I noticed it.
Interesting.
You know why it bothered me? Because there wasn't enough, I don't think.
Right.
I feel like based on where they live geographically, what was going on, that we should have heard more like realistic Hispanic accents.
Yeah.
Because it was really funny. They actually made fun of this quite a bit in the movie, but like the white people are trying to talk to the Mexican people in like Spanish, like bad Spanglish, like, can you please tell your father that I said thank you?
That's right.
And then Danny turns to his dad and is like, he said thank you. And then the dad's like, you can tell him I said you're welcome.
very
Like in
funny
English.
scene.
Like it's so funny. Or they say, gracias. And they're like, you're welcome. Quite hilarious. But when I think about accents and just people who, are first generation.
Right.
They have thicker
Accents
accents.
is thicker,
Even
yeah.
like when I speak to Luis's parents, I mean, we have some broken conversations. You know what I mean? And on both of our parts, we're both looking at each other like, like, do you know what I'm trying to say? And the other one's like, I don't know. So yeah, it's just really interesting.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Luis, what about your vote?
As you guys have heard all throughout the podcast, this is my favorite movie in regards to sports movies so far. At least Disney sports movies, definitely my favorite. So I am going to give it a 9.5. I really, really, really love this movie. Like I said at the beginning, parts of it kind of hit home for me, and it's all the great parts of this movie.
Yeah.
But yep, 9.5 it is.
Good stuff. All right, McFarland, USA. If you listen to that whole thing and haven't watched it, go give it a watch, I suppose. Next week is our voting week.
Yeah.
So you, the fans, of the Walt Vault podcast get to vote on our next movie. We have a random selection of films. We are going to have you vote on
Alice in Wonderland,
Snow White,
or Tarzan.
Yeah.
Shut Up, Phil Collins is on.
Phil Collins.
I love me some Phil Collins.
Phil Collins. So check those out. You can vote on our Instagram page at the Walt Vault Pod. Go there, vote on that. Comment on the post for this episode. Tell us what you liked about McFarland. All that good stuff. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at the Walt Vault Pod. You can DM us there. Send us a message. We might read it on the show. I thought that I got an email this week, but nope. It was a spam message.
He got some spam.
Not
the
from you.
food.
So, if you want to send me an email, make me happy.
You had to like clarify that it wasn't the food.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Send me an email at contact@thewaltvaultpod.com. I'll read your message on the show. It'll make me happy. You'll all be happy as well. If you want to help out the Walt Vault, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can go to thewaltvaultpod.com/Amazon. Click the link, shop on Amazon like you normally would, and a small portion of your purchase will come directly to us. And to make it even easier, you can just bookmark that link and then constantly do it and not even worry about it, not even think about it. We'll keep getting a little bit of money at no additional cost to you. You can also just subscribe on iTunes or Google Play or Google Podcasts or Stitcher or TuneIn or any of the other podcast platforms that we are available on. Hit subscribe. That helps us out, helps spread the word about us. You can leave a rating and review on iTunes. That is also helpful. And the final way is to go to patreon.com/thewaltvault. If you sign up for as little as $1 or more, you can get access to our after show, A Crack in the Vault, where we talk about some extra content about these Disney movies that we are discussing. So go there. I also post my notes from the episodes on our Patreon. And if you sign up at the $5 or more level, we'll send you a gift in the mail. Isn't that nice? That's nice. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you next week for the fan vote. That's been it for this week. The vault is now closed.